All right, thank you everyone for being here. Nothing better on a Saturday to do than to listen to some Silicon Valley VCs. Is that fair? But no, nothing more entertaining. Nothing more entertaining. Yeah. So thank you for being here. I'm Yusuf Khan. I'm a partner at Reie Ventures. Some of you may have mistaken me for valet parking at a hotel. That's okay. Sometimes happens. Your keys are safe. Please tip generously. Aside from that, this is going to be the one panel where we're not going to talk about all things AI, because I think there's a lot of people would like general guidance and advice in building companies, number one. Number two, they'd like perspective from an investor standpoint when you're looking at pitches. And then third is, I don't know, maybe some group therapy if we've got some time for it at the end, like how you've made the transition, et cetera. I'll pose a couple of questions. Happy to make sure that we keep it conversational. Feel free to chime in and then kind of introduce yourself from that standpoint. So I think probably the first thing to ask is, each of you have come from a background of having built companies or been integral parts of seeing companies scale and then made the shift into venture. So you've kind of gone from operator into venture. What are some of the lessons that you are imparting to founders as they think about building companies because you've gone through the journey yourself? Anshu, would you like to start?
Okay. So I'll introduce myself.
Yeah.
So I'm Anu Agarwal. I am a general partner at Converge VC. I've been part of 5 startup journeys, and all of them were pre-revenue. So from zero to exit, all 5 of them thankfully got acquired by large public companies. So I was done with I paid my dues on the operator side.
And so you decided after the 5th company that you wanted to, right?
Yes,
okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's been very interesting journey. I love the operator side actually. So it's kind of a bittersweet leaving the operator side and joining the dark side. Okay.
I don't actually. I mean, okay, fair enough. Let's call it fair enough. That's fair.
But I think I'm making the dark side lighter. Okay. So
that's fair.
I do feel that way.
Welcome.
Thank you. And so, what the question was more on
the lessons that you learned as a founder that you want to impart.
So the lessons that I learned as a founder was the first thing is that the team matters. The most important thing in any company that you're building early stage, the team is the main thing, and how cohesive as a team you are. And you have to be able to surround yourself by people who are smarter than you, and you have to be able to surround yourself that complement you. So there are no egos involved when you build your team. So that's number one lesson. And I think we all know that. It is true even when you're working in large companies. But there are so many large companies. You do have a choice. In a startup, you don't have a choice. You got to wear many hats. So you have to be. Some days you are even picking up the phone and answering customer calls, or customer may be shouting at you, and you should be able to take that. Whereas in a large company, you'd probably give it to somebody in customer support and say that deal with it, kind of a thing. The next important thing is, and we've known that cash is king. So you got to manage your cash really, really well in a startup, because in the end you have to pay the responsibility is on you for paying your employees, for making sure that there's enough runway. So when to raise money, how much to raise money, it's all a responsibility, and the CEO job is very lonely in a startup. Okay. It doesn't get lonelier. It only gets lonelier because the decision making you have to do as a CEO is just an incredible number of decisions you have to make, which impact lives of the people who are working for you. They are vested in it, and so you are responsible for them. So those 2 are the most important lessons, in my opinion, that I have learned. Just make sure that you don't compromise on the quality of the team.
Rajiv, you've been involved in multiple companies. Fatima, we'll come to you next on the product side. What are the 1 or 2 things that...
So, this is one of those roads where, so I've formed 4 companies, taken 3 of them public, and it was from the ground up all the way down.
How do you deal with so much disappointment?
Yes, that's. So you kind of have this. I will not say
I'm just
failure
kidding.
is not an option. Is a culture that you kind of build from within from day one.
Sure.
And I had one of the best venture guys in my fourth company. I wouldn't say I had one in the first three companies. I had actually useless people as venture capitalists.
Stop looking at me.
That, right?
Keep going.
The
Yeah.
dark side, as you put it, right?
Okay.
There are many like that. I'm
Sure.
not going to say no to that. And it was even more during the early stages of venture capital than now when there's a lot more competition. So I had the honor of having somebody called Mark Perry from NEA, who was a CFO of Silicon Graphics, very seasoned finance guy. And I had such a bad experience in my third company that when I presented to NEA wanted to be in my cap table. I was doing well in the fourth company in the first one round I had taken. They called me in and said, hey, we don't need to invest. You present this to our partners. So I presented, and at the end of it, Dick Kramlich and Mark Perry sat in the room, said everybody else left. What does it take for us to be in the board? And I was so anti-venture. I mean,
Right.
here's what it was.
Right.
Okay, so I told them, no rights for you. Basically, you have to vote with me in everything. And you can come and I'll give you observer rights on the board. Would you be interested? Mark said, sure. After, I was shocked. I really didn't expect, I expected the meeting to kind of end and I'm going to go. So I took money from them, and 6 months into working with Mark Perry, as I told you, it was an honor and it was a great experience that I had. He was somebody who was very strong from a financial acumen that I was not. I had run companies, we were growing, the third one had gone to an IPO, but it's not like, I was a financial, I'd built that culture within the company. Within 6 months, we had reached, $40 million of revenue in the first 1 year of the company. That he called me and he said, Rajiv, I think you can take this IPO next year, but not with your financial team, right? And he kind of rattled. And I said, Mark, why don't you join the board?
Wow.
And it was a 180-degree shift for me personally with him, right? Because he taught me that there are others on the other side of the coin. Because I had great technologists on my board. I had Teek Raza, Andy Bechtelsheim was there, Sun Microsystems. So it was an elite board that I had. That he would not tell us what to do on a product side, but he knew from a financial perspective that none of us could add value to, right? So building that team, that strength, not just within the company, but outside, people you can respect, people you can actually adore and take advice on your board is something that you must strive to do. Remember, you're not building a board and a team at that level who's yes men for you, right? Yes men or yes person, it doesn't matter. You really want somebody who can actually add the contributional value, which a lot of founders do not view it that way.
And it took you time over
Yeah.
companies to be able to evolve
to
that.
be
It
able
took
to
time.
evolve to that, right?
Yeah.
I wish I'd done that better in my earlier companies than that, right? It
Right.
wasn't the model with which I operated. But having said that, it's always for somebody like me who's more, an operator than an entrepreneur. I spend a lot of time giving the advice, but sometimes when deals are done poorly, I take the disappointment very badly. I'll give you an example. I had a company which last year during Christmas was so acquired for 5x return for us. I mean, we should be happy,
Right.
right? The founder had a checkout number of 30 million. If I make, I'll sell. And I had helped the company work there, and we had a deal with Google, which we were working on for 100 million in revenue. Google was taking time. As with any large corporation with large deals, it takes time. Founder said, look, at 30 million, Rajiv, I've hit my checkout target. I want to sell. When the offer came in. And I was actually in Antarctica on a ship with COVID. I was standing outside with a satellite phone begging him not to sell. Right? Because
Was that the cold talking?
yeah,
Or, okay.
it was all of it talking.
Okay. fair
But 6 months later, the company struck the deal, and it's 100 million a year more revenue from 120. It became the 20 million we had.
Right.
So we could have added a zero more on the other side
Right.
of that transaction. And the founder now tells me you didn't push me hard enough. I don't know how hard could I push right? But so this is something that I always now give advice to entrepreneurs. You have to have the fire within.
Right.
Not see one exit and just go with that exit and say, this is what I had as a goal. The goal is a function of what you are doing then and where you can be.
So and I think the takeaway for me is thinking about the bigger picture and
Yeah.
bigger scheme. So,
And it was a disappointment for me because, as an operator. So this is something that I give as an advice. You should have the fire within. You shouldn't, some troughs that you go through shouldn't lead you to take a local minima at some point and exit.
okay. Fatima?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. My name is Fatima. I am one of the co-founders and general partners for Mosaic. We're an early-stage venture fund, so spend a lot of our time in seed and Series A across a handful of sectors, but I would say for the most part, real-world businesses. So healthcare, financial services, real estate, prop tech, and then we do a bunch of enterprise as well.
By the way, enterprise software is also real-world business.
I
Just
said
FYI,
enterprise
just
with that.
don't
I
brag.
totally take
Yeah,
that.
hurting
into
my
account.
feelings. We just got to know each other. It's not good. Okay.
My operator journey was more at Airbnb, where I started pretty early and ended up being there for a chunk of a decade, leading out product and growth for the supply side. I won't repeat what a lot of my colleagues here have shared already as the important things to think about when you go from the operating world into the investing world and what you want to carry on. The one that I probably think about, and it's maybe just like a feature from what I ended up doing so much of while I was at Airbnb, was really just obsessing with the product, and so making sure that there is a ton of active testing, iteration, execution, and learning, and things that really need to be addressed from the day one. And so I think a lot of people get afraid with quick pivots that need to be made in the early days, and I think it's much more important to really make sure that if you have an idea you're working on and it's one that is working great, put all the fuel on that fire and make that burn bright. But if it's not, and you need to make a quick decision to actually move in the direction that you're hearing as feedback from your customers, from your clients, from the market directly, then it's critical to be humble enough to accept that and smart enough to accept that fast.
Can I just, we'll go on to the second question. I want to start with you because it's continuing on this thread. Because you've worked at a company and seen a product scale at the level it did at Airbnb, how has that provided you kind of context and insight when you talk to founders now? And I mean, I say this with respect, but like, do you look at some of founder pitches like that's not going to work? Or is it like, because it's at a massive scale, everybody aspires to be at that scale. How, what should they be talking about to be when they talk about product, or how should they be positioning themselves to be able to get somebody who's dealt with product at scale to get attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, there's a lot of pitches that we see, and we internally at least will say that's not going to work, and that's probably the reason why we're not investing in those companies. And there's a wide spectrum of reasons for it. Some
Sure.
of it can be related to the actual market opportunity in and of itself. Venture is a different business. There's a lot of businesses to be built. Not everything needs to be a venture business. And so sometimes, and maybe quite often actually, a lot of the companies we meet, they're not necessarily hitting that bar. Other times it just seems like the product is not necessarily one that addresses a true deep pain point, and maybe one that is a nice to have. Sometimes the team is just not ready for that. I focus so much on the early stages, and I spend so much time really vetting and validating that market opportunity and the team, that those are the two spaces that I will spend a lot of my energy on. And from your experience early on, who are the people that have gone through the effort of really understanding the problems and the solutions that they're trying to service, and who think that it's an exciting, next sexy new idea that one should go and pursue.
Right.
And often that's just not going to be the founder that's going to be able to stand the strength and the headwinds that no matter what happens always follow through. And so I purely think about it from the perspective of, when looking at a founder, have they done the work that's required to really feel strongly about the opportunity and the fidelity of that opportunity?
Right.
And whether the pain point that is being addressed is truly a pain point that's pervasive and actually has a really throbbing need that exists.
Right.
And then, yeah, the product needs to make sense.
So you've done 4 companies. Yeah, you've done.
Adding one comment on that.
Go for it.
In my case, sometimes.
I'm sorry, Rajiv. Could you in the mic?
Oh, in my case, sometimes when I have to tell a startup to change, pivot, or do something where the things are not working out, it's almost like teaching my daughter how to drive. Mm-hmm. It's, after the first 2 goes, you have to hire a professional. You can't do it yourself.
Just be clear. You said 2 goes, not 2 cars.
Yeah,
right?
you
Okay,
basically need to go and tell them
Yeah.
and find some others to sometimes give that communication, even if you know 100% that this is not going to work, right? It's if it's a second-time entrepreneur, you may not have to do that,
Right.
because he or she has the maturity for you to have that head-on discussions.
Gone through the
But for the first-time entrepreneur, many times I've had to do that, where even if it's my input, I have to get some other experts to
Right.
actually help in the process.
So one of the things is there's always, I tend to tell founders on a regular basis, the objective of getting a first meeting with a VC firm is to get a second meeting with a VC firm, right? When you think about fundraising, you've done 5 companies, you've done 4, you've seen, we've collectively, Fatima and I've seen hundreds of pitches. There's going to be 1 or 2 things that, with all due respect, a founder just should not do, probably from your standpoint. Or you would say to yourself, I would not have done that. Are there 1 or 2 things that stand out? You say, look, that probably isn't a good idea. Let's say it diplomatically.
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, those are easy ones because you can think in your head, it's a straight away no. Don't waste your time on any diligence. Diligence is hard.
Sure.
One thing I see, I'd like to say is, because I also invest early stage, there are no metrics at that time.
Exactly. There's no data. There's no diligence.
There's no
exactly.
data.
Yeah.
There's no, and if they are first-time founders, there's nothing that they can show that they have done this before. So what I look for, and I'm a product person too from my background, all we are trying to drive is product market fit. But at that time, there's no product market fit that you're looking for. I personally look for like a product founder fit. So does this product make sense for this founder? Or I look for a market founder fit, where does the founder know about this market?
Right.
If any of these 2 conditions are true, then I dive deeper. If none of these conditions are true, I actually do not look at that company, because I firmly believe that you have to have some fit to actually reach the product market fit. And I could be wrong, but at least I have like a guiding principle here that I don't want to look at the companies that don't have one of these 2 fits. And I've seen founders making me say, oh, I've always liked entertainment and movies, so I want to do in this. That's not enough.
Okay.
And I bring that example since we are in Southern California, because I see a lot of founders, I've always had a passion for sports, so I wanted to do this. But no, that's not enough. You need to have expertise, and I see founders making that mistake quite a lot. There's one more mistake founders make, which I think founders should not make, is they try to pressure the investor. That, I need an answer this week. Okay, and that's not a good tactic. Creating the urgency is never a good tactic for a founder. You can create urgency different ways if there is a real urgency, but don't create artificial urgency.
Rajiv, you've worked in very specific domains. You've built companies in a bunch of areas. You see founders, therefore, who come, will pitch you from that standpoint. What are the 1 or 2 things you're saying, please don't say that or please don't do in those pitches?
Yeah, so the way I look at a startup, because usually there is not even a well-defined pitch when we are talking to them.
Sure.
So essentially they're coming in and they have some generic ideas or generic area of strengths where they've published some work, etc. And what I'm usually look for is every startup has to have what I call the 3-person completion, and maybe 1 person with 3 skills, but 3 sets of skills. One is this person the technologist, the visionary who can create it? That in a traditional company could probably be a CTO. Or the executor, which could be a VP of engineering.
Right.
And the 3rd person is the product market fit personality. Right? In the rare occasion, you may have a founder who can span 2 of them, but not 3 of them. especially if it's a first-time founder. Right? I mean, you can have somebody who's got 2 out of those 3 fits.
Right.
So when we look at them, we look at that assessment. Is this a completed vision, or is it a kind of, does he have this ability to scale to the execution perspective? And the question for the entrepreneur is he or she willing to accept that need for that third person?
Right. Are they willing to accept that there's a gap in that team? That for that company to be successful.
For that company to be successful,
right.
You need to be able to bring that. Right?
Do you recognize your weakness, or do you recognize?
So we do ask them the question. And some of them are like, I'll give 0.1%, and you're not going to get that thing, right? This is like,
right.
What the hell are you thinking, right? I mean, your ownership has to. So we do ask them to build if you were to find the right people, what is the model you want to do?
Yeah.
I mean, and in all of those experiments, you can see sometimes some people are like, I am the core contributor, and everybody is a employee.
Yep. Yep.
And in a startup, the culture has to be everyone is a founder.
Right.
Ideally, you want everyone to own that feeling that I am the founder of this company. I own an equity share in this. I am part and parcel of that. Building that culture, sometimes many founders can't do.
Right.
And it becomes very clear in their discussions early on. And that's a no-go for us, right? You have to build that capability. You have to be magnanimous. Bringing in better people than you often requires paying them the right amount.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Fatima, you've looked at so many different verticals in spaces where, there hasn't been a large, a generation of venture-backed companies, whether it's prop tech or otherwise. But you clearly have had to understand that market and see what the opportunities are. So when you see founders, what are you typically looking for? What should or should they not be doing to be able to talk about how they conquer a market opportunity like prop tech or others?
Yeah, I think it's really important and some of these things were said earlier, I'm just going to maybe package them slightly differently. I think it's really important for founders to have the insight that's necessary for them to succeed in the market, the opportunity, the product they want to bring forward. So that founder product fit or founder market fit really is critical, particularly when you get into industries that are otherwise maybe a little bit harder to crack into, either because of regulations. Healthcare is one of them. The same is true for financial services. And real estate as well. It's a fragmented but heavy hitter industries ecosystem. And so you really do have to have that level of insight and rationale as to why this is the opportunity that is best suited for you to lead as the founder and the founding team. And the other thing we really look for is really, are there ways to somewhat de-risk the business through commercial opportunities or commercial partners that people are starting to bring together for their teams?
Sorry, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the way that we think about it is, any company, and I guess like in some ways we're sitting at a technology conference, technology has become pervasive across the board. Being able to really find defensible moats in tech is so difficult at this point, and everything is replicable. And so 2 months down the line, you'll have version 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 of your companies. And if it's a smart idea, you should have all those people coming through and trying to find a way to be able to replicate what you're trying to bring to market. Now, the only way you can truly succeed is what's your distribution, what's your advantage, what's your ability to really get further ahead on the execution side. And I'm kind of taking table stakes that your product is one that people love no matter what.
Right.
And so in that regards, looking at some of the industries that we spend a lot of our time in, we're constantly thinking about what are the ways in which you can circumvent that execution hurdle and start to find the right kind of partners who can help you bend that risk curve, get you to a much more robust P&L earlier than anybody else that's going to be coming on the chain.
Fantastic. Anshu, could you talk a little bit about your firm in terms of the areas you focus on and maybe a couple of companies that you've invested in, that recent investments?
Yeah, so we are an early stage firm. We invest in pre-seed, seed, and Series A, seed being our sweet spot. We invest in enterprise B2B with most of them. Most of the investors do that. So I'm going to say what we don't invest in. We don't invest in health tech, pharma. The reason is we just don't have, within our team, we don't have domain expertise, and it does require domain expertise to invest in something that complex as health tech, pharma, and all. So given that we invest in B2B tech, in B2B tech also for the current fund, we are investing primarily in, we call it AI infra. So, and AI infra, some people mistake it having the hardware layer. So we don't do the hardware layer. NVIDIA is very strongly positioned there. So,
right.
And we are
It's
not
NVIDIA and everybody else. Yeah, okay. Right.
We're not that big a fund also that we would fund the competitors to NVIDIA at this time. But between the models, large models, foundation models, frontier models, and the application, there's a whole layer of software, which is the middleware. And with every technological wave, whether it is cloud or mobile, this software layer, this has been rewritten.
Right.
So this AI is rewriting, or for AI it's being rewritten, and we call it AI picks and shovels. Okay, so that's our sweet spot of technologies. We also invest in native AI or AI native application layer, which used to be called, think of it as a vertical SaaS mainly, but in the vertical areas we invest in those in AI native. And last but not the least, we have been investing for a couple of previous funds in robotics and AI combined. That has created like really new sets of companies that are leveraging. And I make a joke, AI is doing everything that I wanted to do, write and maybe create music, and I'm still loading the dishwasher and I'm still mopping the floor. So there has to be a chain somewhere where
Right.
AI is doing the rest and I can do the better stuff. So the kind of companies that we have invested in.
Just one or two that you stand out.
So one of them that I recently invested, it's in, I come from the dev tooling world also. I love that space. So this is, and there are lots of AI code generation companies. So this is the company that I invested in. It's not AI code generation for developers. It's AI application generation for non-developers. So think of Canva for application development.
Wow.
And that's one of my. It's a pre-seed, so it's very early, but I think it's not a winner-take-all space. So I'm really hoping this would be. And the other ones that we are invested in have been in robotics recently, and they are in warehouse automation and warehouse automation and smart manufacturing.
Right.
So these are the areas.
Okay. Rajiv, you want to go next?
Yeah, so we are basically a 350 million venture fund, and what we have been investing in is pretty much anything in enterprise. There's been one B2C company that we have invested out of the 32 odd companies. I used to say we don't invest in healthcare, but we did invest in healthcare too.
Wait a second. So I just want to clear this up.
I do not.
So you don't invest in healthcare, but you have invested in healthcare. And
Yeah.
you did invest in a B2C company. Was the B2C company also called Clear? Is that why? Because it has the same name?
No, the Clear is been our company.
Okay, that's your brand before
what's
other
brand.
Clear. Okay, fair
Ventures
enough.
has been.
Okay.
We're very clear in being very clear in our answers right up front to the founders.
Well
And
said.
That's
well
something very,
well
very,
said.
very
So primarily
aspect of what
primarily
we were all
B2B
about.
and enterprise, but you have done some healthcare.
It's been
Okay.
in enterprise,
Good.
so I'm just going to give you. I mean, essentially, the way I look at it, our investors are usually the endowment funds, trusts, pension funds, et cetera. They don't care whether I'm doing the coolest AI or whether I'm doing picks and shovels or whether I'm doing an RV. They just want to see the returns.
Okay.
So we no longer really focus on that. We focus on areas where computer science certainly is has been our threshold of what is the commonality. But anything that it applies to could be in the intersection with healthcare.
Got it.
So one of the companies we have done, for example, is a company called Evidently,
Mm-hmm.
which is a cognitive AI company in a healthcare space. So if you walk into Stanford emergency room, for example, it's used by the physicians to determine what is ailing you from your past without having to read 10, 12 years of your chart history.
Wow.
And figuring out your current ailments. It also can be used for filling out insurance forms, etc. So essentially a cognitive AI solution built by a team which had done Siri, essentially. And we have another company, just to give you a complete opposite of that,
Sure.
which is what I wanted to do.
Please.
is we do hardware too. We have
Okay.
3 hardware companies, so comes to the thing.
Yeah.
I don't mind if I'm doing RV. I just need to understand and be able to make money.
But
for my
in all
investors,
seriousness,
right?
part of that is a large bet on the founder as well,
On the
right? The
founders.
founding team. So
It's
right.
really the founder who comes in.
Right.
And to me, what venture has done the best, having moved from an operator role,
Yep.
is the first few months of working with the founder and learning something new is just absolutely the best thing of venture.
Right.
Everything else of then changing the diaper and doing the work is
Okay.
part of the
He was referring to a term sheet on that one, by the way.
Right,
That was the
every aspect
euphemism.
of
Okay.
things.
So,
I don't want to go there,
Yeah,
but
totally.
it is what you have to go through with many of these companies.
Totally.
But to contrast it to the other side, we have a company which is building a fan, and you would say fan. You guys have invested.
You're in the
about-
fan business.
It's basically a titanium material on which piezoelectric material on which a fan is etched. It's 1 inch by 1.5 inch, 2.5 millimeter thickness, and it can be put on your any chip, and it can take the heat of a big fan, 5 to 8 watts of heat.
Wow.
Using air. You can go and type AirJet and MacBook, and you will see what the product does for
MacBook Pros and Mac
essentially,
Airs, yeah.
laptops, every electronic device, right?
Right.
We have 4 laptops rolling out. We have a number of products coming out.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the fastest ramp we could have from 0 to 200 million kind of goal that could ever be achieved. And we have a liquid jet tool too. So it's also hardware. It's a chip.
Amazing.
But it's not a chip to go up against NVIDIA. It's a chip that helps NVIDIA
Right.
make its devices be cool enough to be deployed in a realistic half the space data center.
Fantastic. Fatima, you've talked about some of the spaces. Can you talk a little bit about the companies and a bit of the stages that you focus on?
Yeah, so we are a $150 million fund. We lead our rounds. We're high conviction investors in the companies that we back. I'll give maybe 2 examples, one company that's a bit further along and then one that's a pre-seed company that we just backed. So the younger one, the pre-seed company that we recently backed, is a company called Cerulean AI. And it focuses on the mid-market segment. So think about companies that are 100 million to 250 million in revenue, but operating in industries like furniture manufacturing or school bus routing systems.
Or as you call them, real businesses.
Real
world businesses.
Real world businesses.
Thanks for that.
And what Cerulean does for them really is that it becomes their de facto chief AI officer. So everybody knows that, there's obviously a big tectonic shift taking place in technology. These people are never going to hire the best and the brightest of AI and ML engineers at their companies. But they still have sizable P&Ls, and they know that they need to find ways to become much more efficient, and who doesn't want to do that? And so what Cerulean does is it sits as the intelligence layer for these companies. It plugs into all of their systems, gives them assessments as to what are the ways in which they can run their businesses in a better manner, leveraging the latest in technology. And then it has a vendor marketplace that it maps them back to actually go through implementation. They're really young, and they're getting 6 to 8x ROI on the companies that they're working with for the projects that they're supporting. So it's an exciting one, and we're enthusiastic about where they'll go. Another company, which is more in the healthcare space, is actually a company called Uvo that's focused on the Medicaid population. And so people who are in the either lower income threshold or in underserved areas in the country. And 30 million people are on Medicaid, but Medicaid is terribly run, and it's just very inefficient across the board. And so what Uvo does is it's actually becoming a risk-bearing entity. It takes on all the work that's required to deploy efficient and quality primary care to these patient populations, and it's really trying to be at the frontier of value-based care for Medicaid.
A couple of final questions. If, a lot of founders who are thinking about, the North Star, not just for their companies, but the companies that they aspire to be. If you think about the industry that we've all been in, what are 1 or 2 of those companies, or maybe a company that you think, that they executed really well, or they've done really well and made a standout product that stands out?
From our portfolio? Or
No, just in the industry, from an industry standpoint.
Industry, okay.
Like, founders want to be able to say, I want to learn more about that company and how they did it, and one that you may have followed or seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than the 5 that you actually did, of course. That's different. Yeah. No offense. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
No, I think the companies that I tell my founders to aspire to actually how they have done is one of the acquiring companies that so DigitalOcean acquired my company, and I think that what they did was very good. They took the cloud. I mean, AWS, Google, they were actually leaders in the cloud, but the cloud became, I think you needed a PhD to run the cloud. So
Okay.
what they came out with was like really, really simple way of if you want a VM, it should just take you like less than 1 minute. So it's a 60-second experience to launch a VM. It should be that simple. So the usability of your product should really, really matter because, first of all, it should not require a degree or experience or certification to run that. So that's one company I actually really admired, and I sold my company to them because I admired them so much. It was not just, it just I wanted to partner with them, and then they saw that
They've executed well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one company, and I come from the cloud world, so that's how I. Another company I would say that I really, I mean, they're kind of darling for tech right now is Databricks.
Of course.
Okay?
Yeah.
I think they took that problem that we were seeing with data, and they really, really honed it well. And that's one thing I tell our founders. It's like, work on the problem. Don't everybody who walks in the door feels like a customer to you. That shouldn't be the case. Find your zebras in a farm full of ponies, okay? And that zebra is really, really important. Don't try to be like a product for every single customer, but try to be a product which works really, really well for certain category of a customer. And I think that's how I tell my founders.
Fatima, you next, and then Rajiv. Sorry,
Yeah.
go for it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to maybe follow the theme of just perseverance. And there's 3 companies that everyone can probably easily find a ton of information on. NVIDIA, Airbnb, and Zoom. And the reason I say all these 3 is purely because you really have to think long term, and you really have to see what you can accomplish, even if you really have to squint your eyes to see where that can go. And each of these companies, if you go through the process of just looking at their history, and there's so much available that you'll actually be able to study it pretty well. And it'll be a fascinating weekend read. I promise it's not going to be boring. Each of those 3, I think, will be phenomenal. NVIDIA, nobody would have imagined where it's at today, and it has had a long plateaued journey for a couple of years still, or almost like, a decade, if not more, till it started to completely catapult into its latest position today. And you have to, there's a lot of talks that Jensen has done, and so you can probably hear him talk through it. Airbnb, I was there from the early days, and honestly, people thought it was a travel agency, and I was joining it at a point in time when my family thought it was a travel agency. They're like, what are you doing? You're leaving private equity to go where? And so it was, clearly a very different world.
And now they're saying you left Airbnb to go where?
Exactly. Now it's the other way around. And so, that journey in itself, it was really hard to raise capital for a very esoteric idea that, again, Brian, Nate, and Joe were obsessed with, and you can read a ton about them as well. And then I think Zoom is the same thing. Eric started off at a point when there was, 1,000 other competitors out there, and nobody would have believed that Zoom needed to exist. And here we are today, where I'm pretty sure every single one of us has used it, if not hundreds of times, thousands of times, or at least once,
Yeah, for sure. Rajiv?
So I'm going to pick 2 companies. One is the company that I actually invested in, but didn't think that it's going to be as it was.
Oh, wow.
As it's
Okay.
become, because it's pure execution among the founding team that they happened. It's a company called Toast, which went IPO. It was in my current portfolio that we did, right? It was one of our early investments that I was part of the first round.
So Toast, you said.
Yeah,
Okay.
Toast.
Is it fair to assume, and just correct me if I'm wrong, that company was it was on the brink of kind of collapse at one stage, and then just
many times.
Many
But
times.
Let
Wow.
me tell
Okay.
you
Yeah.
about the history about the company, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what it is if you're going to every restaurant, you are being swiped today by
Sure,
Toast,
yeah.
by Square. I mean, you see Toast as a payment platform.
Totally.
But they were never the payment platform. From day one, the team wanted to actually build the entire restaurant space. So let's say the two of us decide to do a Indian restaurant, just speaking.
Pakistani, but sure, why not?
Pakistani,
Okay, no,
Indian,
I'm just kidding.
Restaurant we wanna do.
Just kidding. So.
We have a cook maybe, but we don't know where the supply comes from.
From Karachi, sure.
We don't
Next,
know
yeah.
how-
Okay, yeah,
or
totally.
From Karachi or
Of course.
something.
Thanks.
We
Yeah.
don't know how much salmon we are going to be wasting. We have no supply chain. No, these guys actually camped themselves in a Cambridge restaurant, literally sitting there and writing the software for them.
Wow. Okay.
Okay? And it was a complete automation of everything needed in the Cambridge Square. 2-3 restaurants eventually. but
Amazing.
Completely automation. It's pure execution. Market cap is significantly bigger than Square. Square had 5 years of lead
Yeah.
in terms of as a payment platform. But they took the restaurant space, vertically challenged it, and completely automated it.
Wow.
The second company I wanted to mention is something that you've already mentioned, Fatima, which was one of my largest customer, which is NVIDIA. Jensen in 1998 to 2012, when I sold my company, all the chips that NVIDIA done were using our software
Nice.
for the core implementation. He, in fact, called me and said, don't sell Mac.
Okay.
And recently, when I introduced him to, this is one of my companies need an intro to him, I went there. He said, what was NASDAQ at Rajiv when you sold? You shouldn't have sold, right? And I said, you're absolutely right, but what I should have done is just taken the money and put it on your stock.
Right.
And again,
Right.
one of the things I have to tell you about him is people don't understand this about him. 68 people report to him. And the reason why 68 people report to him is if he finds you have a company which is competing against him and winning in training in 2 benchmarks, he's got 3 of his people has been moved into that. It's a war room that he manages directly. He's that competitive today. Taking on NVIDIA and investing against NVIDIA, which obviously had a lot of the chip companies I knew, I would not do against Jensen because
Right.
I know this culture
Right.
that he runs. It is a highly competitive, highly charged technical culture. What taking him on is a real uphill task for any semiconductor startup. And that kind of focus from an entrepreneur for that long a period, that's what I admire about that company.
Okay. Let's talk about post-investment. Talk about, and this is important for founders to think about which VC fund they actually work with. How do you work with your portfolio companies? We've got a few minutes, and then post-investment. Yeah.
Well, when I was a founder, the last thing I would want is investor meddling in my affairs.
Okay.
But that said, I would love investors helping me out. Okay. So I don't want to be operationally involved in the company, but if they want my help, I'm always there. If they want introductions, I'm always there. If they want my background being product and marketing, they always come for marketing. And marketing expertise in tech is always limited, so they always come to me. So I love working with my founders only because they need me, not because I want to meddle in their affairs. So that's a real. Having been on the founder side, I think it's really, really important for investors to realize that they should not be actually actively.
How many times have you bit your tongue and you think, oh my God, if you just asked me, I would have told you?
Many times.
Okay,
Many,
fair
many
enough.
times. So yeah, it does. But I think we have to let founders do the magic.
Got it.
Okay. Because the magic happens there. We're not living and breathing what they are.
Rajiv?
Actually, that's very difficult for me. And I'm not going to be more blunt than that. Because I'll tell you, I want to be the first call if they have an issue. And I really try to build that relationship with them. But if the founder is a second-time founder and needs me to come in and work. So for example, one of my companies, the 2 founders, one of the founders' wife had a physical reason why he had to quit. He basically could not spend the time to be in a founder where the product was coming out. And they both anointed me as a CEO that you need to take out. And you're the only one who can do this right now.
And make a
You need to
decision.
Come in and do that 6 months for us.
Wow.
Right? And I took that job and I did that. I know my LPs don't like it even when I take that, but it is an obligation that if I invest, and this maybe, knock on every wood, I can. Today, for me, I'm not a venture capitalist where I take a statistical arbitrage on my companies. I have no failures as of now with, 14 investments that I've done. And I want to try to keep that. And I've done that same with my 4 startups. Failure is not an option, it's a speech that I start with.
And you'll do what it takes to be
And
able
I
to
will
move it
do
forward.
what it takes.
Got
If
it.
you want me to come in and help you clean the place, I'm there.
Right.
It is important to make them understand that, and that's nothing to do with them. But every company needs a lot of help.
I think that.
And I wish I had that from all my investors in the first 2, 3 startups. I had it in my 4th startup, where some of these well-known figures would connect me to customers. That made my life quite easy for me.
Yeah. Fatima?
Okay, I'm going to give you a quick answer because I keep seeing the
Yeah.
1-minute sign come back up.
Totally.
I treat, and this, I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but I treat a lot of my relationships with my founders similar to how I've treated parenting, and I have kids that have different needs at different times. And they're wildly different from each other. And the hope is that you're able to do what's required and is in the best interest of that particular kid at a particular point in time. And so I try to adapt myself to the needs that are required. I am an early stage investor, and so inherently you have to roll up your sleeves and be pretty active with the companies, and you have to both be sharing the hard facts when required, but also be humble enough to realize that, there's a whole lot that they're doing on a day-to-day basis that they're going to know the best answers to, and be open to changing your perspectives because of that. So
Appreciate that. Yeah. Well, with that, we're going to close. Thank you, Anshu, Rajiv, Fatima. Appreciate really all great insights. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.